Hey, it's Soul, and I've taken over the Q&A once again. Over to my left is Josh Allen, who I've effectively mind-controlled. He's going to read out questions, and I'm going to spit out some nonsense that hopefully will make a little bit of sense. So if you could please, let's get right to it.
Awesome. So we do have a lot of questions to get through today, and we're just going to dive right into them. First one comes from Azavara, who asked, any updates on the plans for artifact appearances post-Legion?
No. Haha, easy. Well, I'll clarify really quick. We still want to have these appearances be available for players who have already unlocked them. The exception would be skill-based ones, so we're talking about unlocking the Mythic 15 skin as well as the Mage Tower one. As for like all of the other ones, feel free. Next.
Similar question here from We Are Legion on Twitter asking, will we still be able to use the new Druid Forms, such as the Bear and Cat, from the artifact weapon after Legion?
You just picked the same question twice. The answer is yes. Same difference. Moving on, please.
Okay, question here from Zyra, who asked, how will upgrading our legendaries to 1,000 work when the raid releases?
It's going to work the same damn way. Okay. It's going to almost work the same damn way. In this case, it's going to be bug-free. At least, we hope it's going to be bug-free. But it's pretty much going to be the same thing as it was for the previous patches. Next!
Next question comes from Silent Hit. Another question about legendaries asking, will legendaries become more available in 7.3.5 or in the future of Legion?
Well, there aren't going to be more legendary. Okay. So you're talking about, are they going to be more available? Not, are there going to be more whatever. The short answer is yes. We just haven't quite figured out exactly how that's going to go about. And with regards to any data mined information that you looked at, well, don't hold your breath. You're probably going to be disappointed. The answer simply is that we want to do something about it because legendaries are kind of like the last bastion of stuff that you have to wait for with regards to like if you're a new player or an alt. You know, we have all sorts of catch-up mechanisms for this and that, but not so much for legendaries. So we're going to be working on that and, well, we'll get back to you. Next.
Cool. Next question from Aludai, who said, any plans for balancing underperforming specs before Antorus?
Basically, no. We're not going to do anything before Antorus. We're going to do it afterwards instead. Now, something to make clear is that these, the 0.5 patches that we've been releasing, they don't necessarily have much to do with what's going on with the upcoming raid. I mean, they have a little bit to do with that because we want to try to cover all of our bases in like one patch if we could. In this case, though, and don't take my word for it because we might still plan something for another small patch. The 0.5 patches were for more like kind of medium to big size overhauls for some of our classes. Notice though that some of those slightly bigger class changes, like for Feral Druids, that happened in 7.3, since we don't have a 7.3.5 patch planned. As for raid balancing though, it wouldn't quite make sense for us to do like class balance changes before the raid comes out. We would want to do it afterwards. Like I said, these are for like the 0.5 patches or for like major overhauls. So while that might not be what you're looking for, it sounds like you're just looking to see if there's going to be an actual big overhaul, right before the raid opens. It's not going to happen. And let's move on to the next question, please.
Excellent. Question here from Hambrick, very much along the lines of what you were just saying. Are there any plans to reduce the viability of old set bonuses? Having 6 slots locked behind tier feels really bad.
We do want to do a little something about it, but in retrospective, it looks like we kind of goofed with having this sort of convoluted gearing set where, you have like a complete set and then you get new gear, but then you don't want to use the new gear because you still have this complete set. And it's just, well, it doesn't feel very good. Now, this isn't anything new. A lot of the time when it comes to gearing decisions and you get something nice and shiny, you think to yourself, okay, do I want to break my 4-piece so I can start getting this? Or do I want to wait and see that I can get, a brand new set to replace the previous set? In this case, you have a lot of slots to possibly replace. And then you have, of course, legendary gear into the mix. And that, like I said, it just kind of muddies things up. So it's something that we want to address. I mean, we had earlier iterations or earlier patches where we nerfed previous sets in order to make the newer sets more attractive. But we're seeing what's going on here, and in the future we're going to try not to make the same mistake. Was that good? Did I fool them? Let's move on.
Okay, cool. Similar question here about tier sets coming from Hummus, who asked, what is the philosophy behind certain tier sets forcing a very specific play style? For example, Havoc tier 20 and tier 21. And will we see changes towards more quote-unquote neutral bonuses, for example, Havoc tier 19, going forward?
So I guess the thought behind that is we screwed up, and that we don't really want to have that sort of scenario where a tier set will just totally alter gameplay, and then we don't want tier sets to limit players' choices. We want it to be like an option. And when, since tier sets are so attractive already, for the most part, you kind of gravitate towards wanting to complete that set because supposedly you're going to get a bigger bonus out of it. And in this case, it does. So in the future, what we want to try to do is to strike a better balance where we don't want to have like a super passive kind of set like what you see with some tanking sets, but we still also want to enable players to have a choice as well. So we want players to have a little bit more agency, feel rewarded for doing it, but without being so stuck with a certain play style or a certain rotation. Cool. Let's move on.
Okay. That makes sense to me. Next question here from Vivek asking, with the success of MDI, how do you see the team expanding on Mythic Plus? What do you think of having seasons every tier, like how WoW Progress tracks players?
I think that overall the Invitational was quite the success. As for expanding on the idea, we don't really have any super solid plans yet, but we do plan on, of course, continuing on with the system in future expansions. So we could possibly see things like, I don't know, like different kinds of rewards, more fixes, and things like that. But yeah, overall, we're pretty happy. We want to see the system continue, and there is definitely a bit of balancing that we want to take a look at. And to be honest, it is thanks to the Invitational that it gives us this sort of opportunity. Now, we're not talking about homogenizing or pruning so much, but more like extreme scenarios, like when you have a team full of battle resers. That, without going into any like promises of nerfing, that's something that we want to take a look at. And that's about all I have to say for that one. Next.
Good example of that from Netherial, who asked, has the Mythic Dungeon Invitational given the team more insight on what classes need help with defensives and or utility?
I think I answered this pretty well enough in the previous question. In fact, I might have screwed that up and mixed the questions around, but who cares? I answered everything. Let's move on, okay?
All right, moving on. Question from Valark, who asked, can we expect better mission rewards after followers are 950? Current rewards don't seem commensurate with the increased resource cost encounters required. Is the new max level merely for access to Antorus raid missions?
Yes and yes. The 950 missions are going to give better rewards than the 925s or the 900s. And the 950 item level is going to be required for doing the Antorus level raid missions. So what do we got next, man?
Question here from Airnath, really short and to the point. Mm-hmm. Can you make Argos Whistle upgrade account-wide?
No. Actually, yeah. It's going to be hot fixed, so stay tuned.
Question here from Garasar, who asked, how do you feel about PvP seasons being synced with patches? Is this going to continue to be the norm or just coincidence?
I know that we had said before that we weren't going to necessarily tie patches to PvP-related stuff, but I mean, obviously in this case it did. This is something that we kind of sort of have to continue, especially with regards to, like, if there is a major patch that comes in with a bunch of balance changes. We don't want to have a scenario where there's a bunch of these changes in the middle of a PvP season that could possibly affect the final rating. Now, if we had a small patch, such as the 732 patch that's coming, where there aren't a whole lot of changes going on, that might be something where we would kind of ignore the whole season timeline. But with the kind of patches that we have been releasing up until this point, the alignment is still looking pretty good. We at least have a pretty good schedule of content coming out, and so the patch and season schedule seems to sync up pretty nicely, at least so far. Next.
Cool. Next question from Faralea, I believe is how that's pronounced, who asked, will world quests be account-wide in Crocune and Macquarie?
No, they won't. And the reasons they aren't because we don't want to, but they're more technical than anything. For the most part, a lot of the questing that goes on in Argus is just kind of a reflection of the world quest that you'll be doing later. It'd be really weird, or it might even cause problems if you happen to have like a world quest that's on top of an existing quest. You might have seen something kind of similar to this happen if there's, like, let's say there's an Legion assault going on in like Northern High Mountain. Like that quest where you have to like free some Murlocs and kill some demons, obviously kill some demons, but at the same time you might have a normal High Mountain world quest to save or kill a bunch of Murlocs or some other objective. So it turns out that they stack kind of funny where you have to complete, basically you would end up completing the assault based world quest first, and you're not even able to complete the other one because the assault is still going on. So that's at least one example of the technical stuff that we're trying to avoid when it comes to a world quest and a normal quest overlapping. Unfortunately, that just means that world quests will have to be unlocked the good old-fashioned way, but we have worked pretty hard to make sure that the quests themselves, they're unlocked in a pretty timely manner. Cool? Cool. Let's move on.
Okay, cool. Jen Rainbow 81 asked, will the artifact knowledge cap be going up again, and if so, when?
No. 55 is the cap, and as far as we're concerned, 55 is as high as we feel that it needs to get. Ta-da!
All right, next question. I love this question from Grady. Dearest Ian, I'm curious if whether or not the Spider World boss in Suramar will ever come back. As of writing this, it has been up only once since launch, and I really need rank 3 prolonged power recipe.
Yeah, just wait a while. That's about it.
Question here from Ahira LS on Twitter, who says, if world bosses are to stay at their current item level, well below World Quest, could we get them all up weekly instead of randomly?
You can, but there's really no point. I mean, for one thing, if every world boss was up at the same time, and most everyone is on, like, boss A, meanwhile you're on boss, L, and you're just kind of waiting, you're just queuing up and you're kind of sort of waiting for a group to help you out, assuming that you need a group. It's not terribly different from having too many battlegrounds to choose from, where you eventually have to start blacklisting stuff. But on top of that, they're not coming out randomly anymore. They're coming on a pretty set schedule, so, I mean, it sucks if you happen to miss one that just came out a little bit earlier. You're gonna have to wait for the full rotation in order to fight that particular world boss again. But you can say that it's on a pretty predictable schedule. Next.
Excellent. Question here from Squibs, who asked, will we see any development with the Sylvanas and Greymane storyline?
Yeah, there's just a lot of other stuff going on, and it would be just kind of weird if we, had a little drip, drip, drip of Sylvanas and Gen, still going at it while the fate of the universe is at stake. So just try to be patient with us. We'll get to it. Next.
Question here from Skewy, who asked, you guys said that the broken shore buildings will at one point be ever present. What about that?
We're going to get to it at some point, just not today or tomorrow or a month from now, but it'll eventually happen. Next.
Moving on, next question for I can't say this. Sija? I apologize. I've absolutely butchered that name. Why does the last boss on Mythic difficulty only drop 1 mount and not 2 like in Mists of Pandaria? It's hard to farm them for everyone in the raid group since new raids come so often.
So currently, it's just our desire to only have 1 mount drop for a raid. But in Mists of Pandaria, the perspective was just a little bit different. Remember that back in the MOP days, we had both a 10 and a 25-man player raid, and we wanted to have kind of equal distribution of loot. That meant that, of course, the 10-man group is going to get 1 mount. They're not going to get like half a mount. But it would make sense, it makes perfect sense, to have 2 mounts drop for a 25-man group. But yeah, cut to Legion, we only really want to have 1 mount drop for a group. Next.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense to me. Next question from Artunius DPS. I know you're looking forward to this one. He says, why is there so much RNG in Legion? I understand RNG is a core concept of the game, but Legion blows the roof off of it.
So you're asking the wrong guy. I mean, Ian might talk for a long-ass time about it. Not me, though. So here's the summary. Randomness in Legion is a lot more watered down than it was in previous expansions. Because in those previous expansions, it was very binary. You either got it or you didn't. Mathematically, in Legion, it is much, much more likely for you to get the item. However, when it comes to getting the best version of that item, that's where the odds come back into play that are, that's when the similar odds from the past come into play, where it's very, very rare that you will get the best version of that item. And that really sums it up. Like, statistically, you're more likely to get a full complement of gear. It's just that when it comes to getting the best version of that gear, it's a lot less likely. I mean, your biggest likelihood, of course, is going to be if you're a Mythic Raider. So it might be hard to believe, but the impact of RNG in Legion is less than it is from previous expansions. Now, of course, are we fine with it? No, not really, because there are certain things that we haven't overcome, most notably with legendary gear. But that's going to be a lesson that we take to the future. Next.
Anyway, moving on. Next question from Sasham9 on Twitter asking, is there going to be a catch-up mechanic regarding the Netherlight Crucible for alts?
Yes, there is going to be a catch-up mechanism. Actually, we implemented this catch-up mechanism August 30th, 20... Okay, I'm being really facetious. But Artifact Knowledge basically covers this. Next.
Next question here from Zezzy James on Twitter asking, any new information about connecting servers? Some small realms are really struggling again.
Ooh, this is probably the most useful question that has been asked thus far, and probably for the rest of this Q&A. The answer is yes. There are certain components that prevented us from doing these kinds of merges because of all the server tech that we introduced with like sharding and what have you. But now that we have pretty much all that stuff set up, we tried it out with some other realms. It's, we got some kinks out and we're going to get ready to roll this out soon for other realms. It's just a matter of us just identifying the kinds of realms that need to have these, that need to be connected. So basically just stay tuned for that. I know that there are a lot of servers that are really struggling. Just hold out for a little while longer. Next.
Awesome. Good to hear. Next question from Mings, who asked, any updates on helping off-spec weapons become as powerful as main spec weapons, since AP has been restricted to a single spec?
Yes, we do have an update. We have a thing called Artifact Knowledge, and that's going to be something that we'll implement about a year ago. No, I'm just kidding again. Artifact Knowledge basically covers this. I mean, mathematically, you'll be able to keep two weapons at relative parity, even though it seems really hard to do, even though the hyperbole is like really active and out there with, oh my god, I have to put so much time into, my main weapon as opposed to my off-spec. But if you just take like a week or so to really pump stuff into that alt-spec weapon, you're going to find that you're going to get caught up very, very quickly. And of course, each week you get a higher knowledge level, and the ease of burden gets lesser and lesser. I mean, by the time Antor's comes out, we're probably going to be at Artifact Knowledge like 50-ish or so. So you're going to find that the multiplier and the amount of artifact power that you get is going to be, well, extremely high. So just keep at it. And again, I encourage you to just switch to your alt spec and power that weapon up. You probably won't regret it. Next.
Cool. Question here from Heavy Hunter, who asked, do you use any external resources like Warcraft logs and Simulation Craft, when it comes to class tuning, or do you depend on your own internal, or do you more depend on your own internal data?
We depend on both. Now, when it comes to our internal tests, of course, those are useful because we have all the math, we have all the calculations, we have all the buttons and gizmos, and, we're able to manipulate the calculations as we need to. But things like Warcraft logs are extremely useful because that's the actual data. That's the player data. And for them, that data matters more. Like, it doesn't matter what kind of data we have if it doesn't match what's going on live. So we do take a look, we do course corrections, we monitor the kinds of rotations that are being used to get those kinds of numbers, and from there we compare it with our own. So it's extremely useful that we have both sets of data points to measure. The trend that we want to avoid, though, is to have this whole mentality of having top score be the thing that determines what kind of class a player or spec a player chooses. We do acknowledge that the metagame is extremely important. There are people that chase that. But at the same time, there are people that stick with their one class and spec because that's what they identify themselves as. We want to have that relative parity, but that doesn't necessarily mean that everyone does equal DPS or equal healing or mitigates damage the exact same way, because then that'd be a boring game. So these are things that we're actively looking at to see if we can get a sort of shift in the mindset or in the conversation between players when it comes to what's the best class? Is it the one that does the top DPS, or is it one that offers the most utility? Which isn't necessarily something that's tracked by something like Warcraft logs or even some of our data, but it's something that we're actively interested in. Next.
Next question comes from, I believe it's pronounced Zweilful. I apologize, mein Deutsch ist nicht so gut. I know the terrain in Argos is not yet ready-made for flying. Any chance to see flying possible in 7.3.x?
Unfortunately, no. You will not fly at all in Argos ever. And that's, yeah. Next.
Question from Asiter, I think, who said, how do you feel about active mitigation currently, especially in light of the 100% uptime some tanking classes can achieve, like Guardian, while other tanks like Protection Paladins cannot achieve anywhere near that uptime?
So there are a couple ways to look at this. Now we want to enter a paradigm where it's not absolutely necessary or it isn't the end-all be-all goal to achieve 100% uptime on your active mitigation. The whole point of active mitigation is that it's active. And if it's up all the time, then it's no longer really active. It's like semi-passive. You're just maintaining it. The original idea is that you want to have your active mitigation up 100% of the time when it matters. The other half of the skill cap of tanking is, of course, making sure that you're positioned correctly and that you're responding to changes during an encounter whenever something crazy hits the fan. Speaking personally, I don't mind that the tanks have a different way of mitigating damage because that's what makes these classes unique. When it comes to the possibility of an extreme outlier, like say a Guardian Druid, then those are the things that we'll want to retune and readjust to get them at least in a slightly better state. But a big part of that state is going to have a lot to do with the encounters that players are tackling at the time. There might be a pretty big difference between a boss that does huge single target hits versus ones that do large AoE pulsing damage versus one that deals lots of magic damage versus ones that have a lot of adds. So we want to keep that kind of balance in check. And let's move on.
Cool. Let's move on. Next question comes from Livy, who asked, is there anything from the Great Legion pruning that you regret removing and may want to bring back in some form?
There are things, and they mostly involve some of the unique utility that some of the classes bring. That was done in 7.1 with Shroud of Concealment, and in the next expansion we're going to take a look at this and see what else we can do to possibly bring things back to the table. Next.
I got time for one or two more. Here's a question from Ilidia, who asked, can Prestige or Cumulative Honor be account-wide? Sucks I can't PvP on an alt as it hinders my main's growth appearance-wise.
So for the most part, just like how it is with gladiator mounts and titles, we want that sort of thing to be specific to the character that had earned them. Now with the system as is, it doesn't necessarily mean that all rewards have to be tied with just that character. In the future, we can possibly do things like add a bunch of additional rewards where some rewards are account-wide and some are, specific to that particular character. Once again, going back to the mounts and the titles. We feel that it's important that when it comes to rewards like those, that it's important to show off, to stand on top of that mailbox and show off that cool pennant or that mount that you earned with that particular character. I mean, that communicates to other players. It's like, okay, that such and such person, okay, they're pretty badass. But when it possibly comes to other things, let's say a tabard, for example, let's say that happens to be an account-wide thing if you happen to hit maximum prestige. So that's still something that you can sport and share, regardless of what character you're on, even if it's a character that doesn't do PvP at all. But that's just one example, and we're going to have to take a look at the kinds of reward systems that we're still going to have with prestige, assuming that it's going to go forward into future content. And that's pretty much it. I want to thank Josh, aka Lore, for, not giving me permission to use his body over there and not letting me use his office here and all that. But, oh well. I hope I answered some of these questions better than the bullet points did. And, that's it from not us, but me. Y'all have a good one. Stay safe, stay happy, and of course, stay breezy.